and other energies, today and tomorrow.
Time. When you ship air cargo, time really is money. That's why Flying Tigers gives you 3 ways to get your shipment delivered, all guaranteed 100% or you don't pay. Overnight by 1 p.m., overnight by 5 p.m., and second day by 5 p.m. Flying Tigers. It's on time or it's on us.
Flying Tigers.
Just ask her.
Oh.
Maybe she'd really like to go out with you. Go on.
You're right, Jill. I'll just say it.
Say what, Nick?
Could I
Yes?
tune your car?
Oh, do you think I need it?
Well, it is running rough. First thing I learned at certified service school.
Is tonight okay?
Great.
Tonight? We're going to spend a big evening. I can make reservations.
tune-up,
get some flowers.
Get certified service
Tune-up, babe.
It's a start.
at Union 76.
McLean's Law will be shown Sunday night at 11. We now bring to you Hands Out. Tonight's special presentation of Hands Out on WTCN TV is brought to you without commercial interruption by the Pillsbury Company.
I've been looking for work ever since for the last year. We try to get aid, which they'll give maybe a couple of weeks. And it's no jobs.
Too many people sitting on the back. As far as I'm concerned, there's enough jobs if you want to work. If they cut all the welfare out, made everybody go to work there, there's enough jobs.
The soup lines of the Depression years are grim memories, a dark page out of our history. But now, half a century later, they are back. Good evening, I'm John Bachman. It isn't clear how our economic troubles started. A lot of things are to blame. But the fact is, we are now in a recession, and it's lasting longer than expected. Cities, states, and the nation are short of money and have cut back spending on welfare, food stamps, and other social services. President Reagan says it's time for the old American spirit of volunteerism to take over.
Volunteerism is a means of delivering social services more effectively and of preserving our individual freedoms. John F. Kennedy knew this when he said, "Only by doing the work ourselves, by giving generously out of our own pockets, can we hope in the long run to maintain the authority of the people over the state."
Critics say it won't work. We're giving all we can. And while that debate goes on, many Americans are going through the toughest times of their lives. Furthermore, it's generally agreed that things will get worse before they get better. This winter, the number of Minnesotans drawing unemployment checks doubled. Seasonal layoffs are included, but that's only part of it. New unemployment claims are being filed at what some officials consider to be an alarming rate, and they come from almost every line of work. Office employees, factory workers, trucking, airline personnel, and even city and state employees. It's even worse on the Iron Range, where the winter has been long and cold with 20% of the miners out of work. With the demand for steel down, so is the demand for iron ore and iron ore workers.
Day to day, people don't know if they're going to get back or not. They're laying off 300 more people and make it 1,800 people being laid off here at the present time. People that were laid off with the bunch I was laid off with have our unemployment to April, and by that time a lot of us are going to have to find different work. People who are leaving already are going to Colorado, Texas, some are even going as far as Australia.
About 3,000 miners are out of work, but entire towns share the hard times. Less money is spent in stores, shops, and restaurants, and that has brought on the threat of more layoffs.
A lot of other people up here in the same boat like me, when they laid us off. See, a lot of us don't even know if we're going to get back, and that's the hard thing. I'm making it from day to day, just barely making it. And what I make just enough to meet my bills, and that's about it.
For Kevin, the days drag along slowly. Many of them spent nursing a beer in a local tavern, where they talk about jobs that aren't there and who's to blame.
U.S. Steel has a responsibility to their employees, and I don't think they're fulfilling their responsibility.
This trailer in Gilbert, Minnesota, is the home of another laid-off miner, Kevin Beam. Kevin, his wife Kathy, and their 2-year-old daughter Carrie spend most of their time staying at home these days to save money. Kevin lost his job at U.S. Steel last fall. Since then, the family has been living on unemployment and the WIC Food Assistance Program, which provides dairy products for Carrie. Each day, Kevin and Kathy grow more worried. The unemployment benefits run out next month, the same time Kathy is expecting their second child. Kevin is optimistic about eventually getting his job back, but not soon.
The chances are good of getting back, but it's just a question of when. It's probably, the way it sounds, it's not going to be for quite a while, until well into the summer. And all my benefits run out in April, so that's, I really can't sit around and wait to go back. I really have to find another job before then in order to keep paying bills and everything else.
All across the state, the lines at the food stamp windows are longer than ever. More people need the stamps, but because of federal cutbacks, the qualifying rules have been tightened, and many people find themselves ineligible. Still others are getting fewer stamps.
I used to get $174 worth. Now I only get $127 for 5 people. I don't have to go to the garbage can, but I have to borrow money to make ends meet till the next month. And what good is that borrowed money to make ends meet? Then when that month come around, I end up paying that money back and end up borrowing more money.
Because of federal changes in food stamp rules, about 80,000 Minnesota families will be getting fewer stamps this year. And about 3,000 households will be dropped from the program entirely.
We're trying to get at the people who were never intended to participate in those programs in the first place, but who, through the conflicting federal regulations and loopholes, legally or technically, are participating, and there is no real need for them to be helped at the expense of their neighbors.
Minnesota started the year with 53,000 families on AFDC. New federal restrictions on outside income are expected to remove 5,000 households from the list this year. Another 4,000 will have their grants reduced by about $140 a month. But at the same time, some 5,000 families with outside income are expected to quit working and return to total support by AFDC.
You're hearing all kinds of horror stories about the people that are going to be thrown out in the snow to hunger and die of cold and so forth. Let me just talk a little bit about this. Maybe the biggest mistake, and we're all guilty of it, is we've used the term cutting the budget. We haven't cut a single budget. The budget in '83 is going to be bigger than the budget this year. This year's budget is bigger than last year's, as it was bigger than the one before.
The president's proposed 1983 budget is bigger, but because it does not keep up with inflation, Minnesota will have less money for social programs, as much as $150 million less, according to some estimates. That could remove some 10,000 more families from AFDC and food stamp programs next year.
But what's really at fault here is that we have adopted the notion, somehow or other, and it's illustrated by your question, that every need has a solution in some magic well out there in Washington that's just apparently full of money. And all you got to do is get your favorite politician to go out and dip into the well and pull out some money and send it back to buy your food stamps or to buy your subsidized housing or to buy your this or buy your that. And there's nothing in that well. You know, it's all red ink in that well.
I think a case can be made in economic terms that we need to cut government spending. My problem is with the priorities that we're using. When the federal government, for example, proposes to double defense spending over the next 3 or 4 years, when they continue subsidies to industry, when they provide enormous tax breaks to the wealthy, and then say, well, but we have to balance the budget, so we'll cut food stamps, we'll reduce welfare, we'll cut back Social Security benefits, then I have trouble with that.
A lot of the demagoguery you will hear will be about the fact of the defense budget. And if anything has to be cut, why don't we cut that? We don't cut it because that's what's been going on for the last several years. And it will take us until the middle of the 1980s before we can even begin to come close to equating what the Soviet Union has built up to threaten us with. It is absolutely necessary that we restore that capacity to defend ourselves.
There's no way to demonstrate that the rich are getting richer. Of course, people that live out, you know, in your typical wealthier suburbs are still living there, and they're still driving the big cars or whatever. But do they buy a new car? Do they move into a bigger house? No, you can't afford housing. I mean, even the rich can't afford housing these days.
The callousness, which I find in the Reagan administration, is now being picked up by Governor Quee, and no evidence of concern for the real impact on people.
I'm Gary Flackney. I'll be hosting Hands Out Part 2, Community Response, at 10:30. For Americans, fortunes may have frowned upon, and for the many Minnesotans weary with worry and want, volunteerism is vital. There are hundreds of Twin City volunteers. If you want to volunteer but don't know how to connect with needs, call 222-0561. St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Stillwater voluntary action centers will assist you. They'll identify volunteer opportunities that match your time and talents, and they'll return a call to you. Someone needs what you can do. Be a volunteer, and we want you to participate in our community response at 10:30 tonight, following News Center 11.
For Minnesotans, the budget cutting in Washington is a double blow, coming on the heels of cutbacks by state lawmakers. Minnesota's financial problems are serious, and after a long debate through several special sessions, the legislature reduced or eliminated a wide range of social programs.
The state budget for this year and next year cuts funding for daycare, education, care for the mentally retarded, and many other programs. One of the biggest and most visible cutbacks actually started last year in general assistance welfare. Tough new rules on ability to work have dropped about 9,000 recipients from the program. Low-income, jobless, single people, many of them young, have felt the brunt of the changes. Many of them can no longer afford a place to live, and emergency shelters have been set up in places like the Indian Club in South Minneapolis and in various churches.
When it was summertime, I just grab a blanket and sleep anywhere, you know. But during the fall, it started getting a little bit colder, and I was staying in this abandoned car. Right now, they dragged that car away, so I don't know where it's at, you know. When I took that car, it was kind of like home for me for a while. And the club wasn't open then. I'm really glad it's open now, because it really solved a lot of problems for me and a lot of other people.
The Hennepin County Welfare Department has even taken the extraordinary action of letting some of the homeless people sleep on the floor of the welfare office this winter. Governor Al Quee was surprised to learn of even more drastic measures for shelter.
Prior to this time, people really didn't realize that there's some men sleeping under bridges or sleeping in boxes. But, you know, that's just hard for us to understand of a human being even have to exist that way. And it's interesting, we never even knew that was going on till this year, as far as myself.
26-year-old Steve Johnson lives in this cardboard hut under a North Minneapolis bridge. An open fire is Johnson's only source of heat.
I'd like to see some of them fat cats, you know, some of them people that got money that always tell you, why don't you go get a job or something, you know? People that were born with money, they don't think about this shit, man. Or they don't think about living outside anyway. Because they don't have to, you know? Everything that they got comes natural, man, you know? Get up in the morning, throw a couple eggs on the pan, and toast in the toaster, and you got your breakfast, man. The people I know, they got to go out and find their breakfast. People I know dig out of garbage cans and eat, man. Or else they'll steal for it.
Johnson survives on food stamps and temporary jobs, but says few employers are willing to hire him.
Finding a job ain't as easy as you think. I've asked around for some places that I've already worked and they just don't need you. They got people that they're laying off. What the heck they want to hire you for? Or you don't hire me.
There are free food shelves around the Twin Cities, and the volunteers who work there say it's never been so bad. They say the hungry are showing up in greater numbers than ever before. The shelves are stocked with donations from churches and other groups, mostly with canned goods and crackers, things that will keep, and for the street people, food that can be eaten right from the package.
Well, they're mostly people who are either low income or no income at all right now. A lot of the people living on the streets. In recent months, there have been many more people coming because they've lost their general assistance. Many of them who came regularly before because they weren't getting enough to get by for the whole month, but now they're getting nothing and they're coming in more frequently.
And there are drop-in centers, places to warm up on a cold winter day with a free peanut butter sandwich and a cup of hot coffee. For some, it's their only food of the day.
One thing I see with most of the people is that they've lost the caring of a family. They don't have their families around them. Nobody to depend on. They do turn to friends, but even that is sometimes short-term, you know. When they move in with a friend, the least little thing happens and they're back on the street again. I think that's there's just a lack of love in the life of the people.
Bill and Sandra Armstrong have each other, but not much else. Bill is 52, Sandra 45, and they've been looking for work for a year. Bill found a job cleaning up a Minneapolis restaurant, and Sandra helps him, but together they make only $15 a day on the days they work.
I ain't looking for $50,000 a year job or something like that. Just something so you can pay the rent and buy the groceries. I hate to go down there to that food stamp place every month or every 3 months and sign up for food stamps because I think it's work out there for people. But you gotta know people today. I mean, these places, you just don't walk up and fill out an application, they'll hire you off the spot. You gotta know somebody's working in there. They gotta have somebody pulling for you.
Last Christmas, they were forced out of their apartment because they couldn't pay the rent. Their church found them another small apartment near downtown Minneapolis and paid a month's rent. It's warm and clean, but they live with the constant fear that it's temporary and they don't know where they will get next month's rent.
It's too bad that Reagan or the government doesn't realize that people need homes and need shelter. Prove them out. That's all they have to do. Prove it that they need it. And if they need it, let them have it.
53-year-old Dolores Warren is new to charity. She was deserted by her husband last year and now struggles to get by with the help of general assistance, food stamps, and the Catholic Charities food shelf. Dolores cannot even afford low-rent housing. In desperation, she has moved in with Walter Olafson, a blind family friend.
He's helped me now twice because he says he's afraid to be alone without me because I'm his right arm. And he needs me, and I need him.
Dolores made her first trip to the food shelf on Christmas Eve and has come back many times since.
I'm not ashamed to, because there's other people just like me too that are poor. So it doesn't bother me. Oh, maybe the first time it did a little bit, but then it comes a little easier, I guess, the second time.
Dolores says the best thing that could happen for her now would be to find work, but she's had no luck.
If I had a job, a good paying job, and then I wouldn't have to depend on general assistance or run to people for help. I could, take care of my own self, and that'd make me very proud. I've walked the streets looking for jobs. Sure, some I could get, but they're too far out, and I didn't have the money to even take a bus to get to them, so there wasn't much I could do about that.
Unemployment in the metro area is now at a 10-year high, while the total number of jobs available is at a 10-year low. Competition is increasing for all jobs, ranging from skilled to unskilled, full and part-time. In desperation, many more people are reporting to day labor offices, commonly known as slave markets. But even these menial jobs are getting hard to find.
You get so many of them, you can't tell one that's really sadder than the other. You know, they're down to where they need work. They come in and say, well, I've got to get some work today. And if I got it, I'll send them out. But I hate to, you know, say that, well, I'm sorry I don't have it, but I have to right now.
This group of men found work one day recently shoveling snow off downtown business sidewalks. The pay was minimum wage, $3.35 an hour. And even working full-time at that rate is not enough to support most families.
We're finding it virtually across generations. Families coming in with young kids, elderly people, folks who have real specific and rather critical medical needs, folks who look as healthy and middle class and well-educated as anyone you could find downtown. There seem to be a lot more folks who come from the mainstream who are now in desperate straits.
Tonight's special presentation of Hands Out on WTCN TV is brought to you without commercial interruption by the Pillsbury Company.
In his State of the Union address, President Reagan said it's the American way to give and help each other in times of need. In his State of the State address, Governor Quee said Minnesotans are generous people and volunteers will make up for some of the programs lost through budget cuts. He said the system will work better that way.
Our policy has been to let government do it, but government is more costly, is less efficient, and is less effective. And so what is going to happen, I believe, is that people then will start relating to each other in community and see a person in need rather than just say that the government will take it over.
I don't think we've found a way in which we can organize people on a volunteer basis to go out and care for the homeless, or to make up the loss in the nutritional quality of the diets of people who've been dependent on food stamps, or to deal with the woman on welfare who tried to work and now finds with the changes that she's financially better off by going back to welfare. I don't know how volunteers can deal with those problems. I doubt that the governor knows either.
There'll be people who, like Mayor Fraser, who like the old ways, where people just join together and put the pressure on the legislature and the Congress, put more money into it. That isn't going to happen. No matter how much they fuss about it, it isn't going to happen in the future. The 80s are going to be different. The future is going to be different. Now people are going to find ways, and out of that necessity, that pressure is out of them, they're going to actually develop ways of reaching people.
Even voluntary help is not going to feed somebody who's hungry, unless somebody's prepared to lay out some direct resources, food shelves, we have those in the city, or some other kind of supplement where people are having trouble.
In times of trouble, more people turn to the church, looking for emotional and spiritual help. But now, a lot of people are turning to the church for other things: food, clothing, and a place to sleep.
It used to be that people who had needs would stop by the church, and if we couldn't help them, they'd go. But more and more, there are folks who come by now who have been everywhere, who are, you know, on their last efforts to keep trying. And when I say no, this one guy just smashed my screen door.
Now the church is being asked to do more, to give more. But in many cases, there is very little left.
Members of this congregation and other congregations in this area are literally stretched thin in volunteer time. I think some of them have extended their family budgets as far as they can to continue to contribute to the church. And there's simply no way that we can create the kind of programs, maintain the sort of skill levels that a professional staff can offer, create the breadth of programs that we've been experiencing in these communities in the last 5, 10, 15 years. I'm really proud of how we have been responding, but there's no way we can meet the need on our own. And to ask us to be generous and take over everything, I think, is to be foolish. It doesn't give us credit for what we're doing, doesn't take seriously what we can do, and it creates a lot of resentment even in the people we serve for not being able to do more when we're doing, I think, is very close to what we can do.
Some of the most promising new volunteer programs in the country are emerging from Twin Cities-based foundations and corporations, such as Investor Diversified Services, better known as IDS. IDS has long been known for its landmark building headquarters in downtown Minneapolis. Now, IDS workers are being asked to join the corporation in creating a new landmark in volunteerism. It's a unique program matching their time and money to worthwhile community concerns.
Here's where you play an important part in determining which organizations receive company funding. If you make a personal financial donation to a qualified organization, IDS will match that gift. But we would like to encourage you to go one step further. If you are willing to donate $25 and volunteer 50 hours of time to that organization within a year, then IDS will double the size of the matching gift, effectively tripling the size of your original $25 donation to $75.
IDS President Walter Scott.
I feel very committed in this area. I think it's terribly important and it's terribly fundamental, really the structure of our society, to have people involved in programs of this kind. It's a little like democracy works much better with participative democracy, with people really getting involved in the process, and I think community activities work better the same way. So I feel very strongly about it, and we are trying to design programs which will be encouraging our people to be heavily involved in volunteer activities outside the company.
Scott says IDS and its more than 4,000 employees will contribute close to $1 million in time and money. Curtis Chong, an IDS computer programmer, has already started volunteering. He spends his lunch hours walking over to the nearby headquarters for the Federation for the Blind. Chong is an officer in the Federation for the Blind.
We have to talk about making plans for everyone going to Washington to visit Congress.
Right. Oh, Kurt.
Am I late again?
Well, we waited for you.
Oh, good, thank you.
So you're not too late.
Oh.
You're talking about the Washington March.
And when Federation meetings or some special Braille typing project stretches past the lunch hour, IDS allows him to stay there and make up his company time later.
It's true, things could be better in our society, but things would be a lot better if more people got out there and actually went and worked to try to improve the situation.
Business giving of money, resources, and even employees' time is not new in Minnesota. In fact, many of our corporations like 3M, General Mills, and Honeywell have long been national leaders in this.
One recent example, the McKnight Foundation is giving St. Paul and Minneapolis $1 million each to create hundreds of new jobs for poor people.
The tough thing is for a senator who's lived and worked in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, with a creative business community, with creative employees of those businesses who are always coming up with new ideas.
And since they've done this before, haven't they?
Oh yes, the healthcare competition started right here. Ride sharing nationally started right here in Minnesota. But then you go to Washington, and you're exposed to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce mentality, or whatever it is, that says, oh, it's going to cost money to do this, or it's going to cost money to do that, or business has no business being in public service delivery, But every time I run across that, I go get a Bill Norris at Control Data, or a variety of business people we have in this community. So go on out to New York, or go down to Dallas, or go someplace and talk to some of these business people and tell them, the good that business can do for people.
And I think what's most needed is investment.
by business in addressing social needs as business opportunities cooperatively with other sectors, particularly the government. Most social needs are very, very large, so that massive resources are required to address them adequately. And this requires the pooling of resources in cooperative programs.
Control Data's assembly plant in North Minneapolis is a prime example of what Norris means. The plant began as a cooperative effort between government and private industry. In the late 1960s, Control Data and the federal government each invested over $1 million to help train minority residents. Since then, Control Data has added sensitivity workshops, human relations seminars, and plant counselors to help employees with legal, housing, and other problems. The result has been the creation of hundreds of jobs for the inner city and a profitable computer plant for Control Data.
Occasionally it's said that it's not morally right for social programs to be tied to a profit incentive, but that's wrong. What it comes down to really is making profits out of meeting human needs, and it appears quite acceptable to make a profit in growing, processing, delivering food, basic human need, and the same is true for clothing and housing. So what's different about other human needs? Health care, education? The answer is no basic difference. So I think that not only is it morally right, but it's possible and should be pursued. Furthermore, it takes longer to make a profit from addressing social needs. However, in return for patience, more stable, enduring, and profitable markets can be gained.
Norris favors even stronger cooperative measures between government and business, such as designating enterprise zones. These zones would provide business with tax breaks and other incentives to make new investments.
The enterprise zone is a concept whose time has come. The sooner that legislation is enacted, the better. It provides the most cost-effective means of establishing a framework whereby public-private cooperation can take place to revitalize distressed areas. Actually, both federal and state enterprise zone legislation is needed. Here in Minnesota, the state ought to pass some enterprise zone legislation to make it possible to address the very serious problems in northern Minnesota.
Mr. Norris and Senator Jerrenberger are both members of a presidential task force that is looking for new ways to encourage volunteers and corporations to make up for government cutbacks in social programs. In creating that task force, President Reagan also called on corporations and individuals to increase their cash contributions to charity. Nationwide, U.S. corporations give an average of a little more than 1% of their gross income to charity. In Minnesota, many corporations are more generous. Some companies here give a full 5% of their pre-tax income. But the corporations and foundations say they cannot be expected to pay for all the billions of dollars in federal cutbacks.
Now, Mr. Reagan has said at least once on television, and Governor John Spellman from Washington State has said at least once, that the corporate sector, not the private sector, but the corporate sector is able to pick up the difference between what the federal government used to spend and what it's going to spend now. That's manifestly impossible. That cannot be done. The federal government cuts in the current year in the fields that corporate philanthropy traditionally supports: health, education, social service, the arts, and civic causes. The magnitude of the federal cut this year is approximately $40 billion. Last year, the recorded total of all corporate contributions in the country was $2.5 billion. Well, now the difference between $2.5 billion and $40 billion is enormous.
And individual giving is not expected to help much either. In fact, one recent study predicts individual charitable giving over the next 4 years will actually decline by $18 billion due to tax changes made by the Reagan administration. The need for more volunteerism and corporate giving is being felt in many areas already. One of the most visible of these areas is daycare. Daycare programs for working parents are getting hit hard by state and federal budget cuts.
The Bloomington Child Development Association is one of those in trouble. This is a non-profit organization that provides child care based on parents' ability to pay. The center is losing a $10,000 state grant, which helps keep infant care prices at affordable rates for more than 20 families. Lana Plusinek is one of those parents. She relies on the center to watch her 7-month-old son Joseph while she works part-time and attends college.
I probably couldn't finish school without this.
Joanne Kerr is another parent who depends on the infant care program. She's a working mother and has no place else to leave her year-old daughter Helen. When Joanne heard of the government cutbacks, she persuaded her employer Donaldson's to contribute $1,000 to help keep the infant program alive.
So, yes, I want to let people know that, hey, daycare centers are a good thing and they've got to get money from somewhere, and hopefully people will know that private industry, if government isn't going to do it, private industry or charitable organizations will handle it.
Barbara O'Sullivan is director of the Bloomington Center. She says volunteers from Northern States Power and Honeywell have helped her reduce administrative costs, but O'Sullivan says volunteers can't do the basic job of child care.
I can see them coming in and enriching and enhancing our program, but you can never rely on volunteers for the consistency of care that a regular paid staff person gives. Our staff is a professional staff. They're highly trained in the field and are constantly undergoing training. And, you know, the quality of the program would definitely suffer if we had to use volunteers for the direct care of children.
It just seems like to me Reagan's cabinet just trying to hurt the minorities in this, world. For blacks, we only make up about 12% of this, the population, and he's cutting out, mostly dominant black schools in the Twin Cities. He's cutting out West, Central, Marshall U, and dominantly black schools. So where are the blacks gonna go now? They're gonna have to go and get shoved into the other schools where mostly white kids go. What's that gonna be like? It's gonna be even harder to get education.
One of the education programs facing extinction is the Minneapolis Urban League Street Academy. The academy lost a $100,000 grant from the city. That money was used to pay operating expenses. Unless some other source of funding is found, the school will be forced to close in June. Supporters say the Street Academy is the last chance for many minority youngsters who have had problems in public schools and been referred by the courts and community agencies. Basic skills of reading, writing, and math are taught here. Many Academy graduates have gone on to succeed in college. The students blame President Reagan for the budget cuts which threatened to close their school.
Look what dude's doing, man. Dude trying to make a economical change in 4 years. He trying to make everything talking about just like this here in 4 years, man.
It's called bite the bullet.
And I know. There's going to be so much killing and all this bullets. Yeah. You think the penitentiary got a lot of people there now? Wait until he gets through.
Public housing is seriously threatened by federal budget cuts. The latest proposed Reagan cuts could force St. Paul and other major cities to close many, if not all, public housing units. Some cuts could be felt as early as next month when the new fiscal year begins. St. Paul relies on a federal subsidy to provide 4,300 public housing units for poor and elderly residents. And officials say 1,000 more people are on a waiting list for housing. Many of them are getting desperate.
I know that we see more people selling their blood 2 or 3 times a week to make their ends meet. We've had situations where, well, one of the guys that came in once literally was so distraught that he sat in front of one of our counselors' desk and literally, held something to his neck, a knife, and basically, was saying, what do I do? And he was very distraught.
Janice Repman is director of St. Paul's Housing Information Office. She says in addition to counseling the poor and elderly, she is spending more time helping unemployed people with their housing problems.
You also see people who are being laid off losing their homes. They've never been low income. They've been, working hard all their lives, and they got laid off. And now they can get foreclosed on within a relatively short time, especially if you have a contract for deed. You can be foreclosed on very shortly. So we're seeing a lot of those people. In addition to the people who are being cut off of some type of governmental subsidy, as well as people who are facing problems with NSP, the astronomical rates there that they have to pay. Some of the times people have to make a decision, do you eat or do you pay your NSP bill?
I'm Gary Flackney, host of Hands Out Part 2, Community Response at 10:30. Our communities are faced with the increasing dilemma of demands for services with fewer financial resources. There is need, and there is opportunity for volunteers. Volunteers are our greatest potential resource. Nearly everyone has skills, interests, and time to share with the community. If you're interested, Minneapolis, Stillwater, and St. Paul Voluntary Action Center will be waiting for your call, 222-0561. Their questions will help identify volunteer opportunities existing right now. Someone needs what you can do. And we want your input into Hands Out on Part 2, Community Response, at 10:30 tonight, following News Center 11.
Oh, boy, Louie, let's go to town, huh? Yeah, come on. How much more? Oh, you got some over here yet to do, huh? Yeah. Oh, boy. Show them how you can do it. Show them how you can do it, Louie.
Meet 82-year-old Al Couillard, one of 10,000 retired senior volunteers in Minnesota. Al works as a volunteer at the Brainerd State Hospital. The hospital uses a combination of professional staff and volunteers to care for more than 300 mentally retarded patients.
Patty, look down at what you're doing, sweetie. Where does the blue one go? She's just to E-X-C-I-D. There, you got it. Good. Get the red one. Okay, get the red one.
Al has been a volunteer here for 15 years. He currently works in the hospital's industrial shop, helping staff instructor Larry Axelson teach crafts and woodworking.
Oh, Al he's that right-hand man that's there all the time. I know he spent, I don't know, just untold hours with me. It's every Tuesday and Thursday he has been with me. And he picks up all the things that you can't do as an individual. He pre-cuts a lot of the projects. He works on exercises. He builds training and teaching aids. And then, as you've seen, he works right with the student, especially a student that needs a little one-to-one training. He's right there with them.
Al finds great rewards in helping the mentally retarded residents become more self-confident and independent.
I worked with one young fella. He was, well, he was kind of on a, not bashful, I wouldn't say, but he had a complex. He'd hide himself. Put his hands up to his face. You couldn't see what he looked like when I first started working with him. But now they sent him away. Sent him up to Bemidji in one of these small homes, you know. We have about 8 or 10 patients. They say he's doing real good up there now.
Volunteers like Al Couillard contribute hundreds of hours of work each year to the state hospitals. The time and skills they give are valued at millions of dollars. More importantly, their contributions help the residents know they're loved and not just warehoused outside of society. Volunteers help bring joy to the residents of the Oak Terrace State Nursing Home. Lori Gustafson comes to play the piano. Shirley Barty is a professional singer and regularly volunteers her talents.
They have to cut down on other kinds of programs, and they're going to need a lot more volunteers to fill in those spaces. And any kind of contact from the outside is always good anyway in these nursing homes. It's hope for the future, and it's life, and it's love, it's all those good things.
And you don't have to be an adult to volunteer. Wendy Hilliard and other youngsters come to dance and visit with patients. Wendy has been a volunteer at Oak Terrace for the past 5 years.
Well, I really enjoy it because you make a lot of new friends, and it's really fun to see them when you're on Monday and you're on vacation, or it's nice to see them once in a while. They like seeing young people, and Mrs. Gustafson always tells me, and they really enjoy it. They like holding our hands or, you know, saying hi to us.
And in Duluth, a promising volunteer project is underway to aid cancer patients and their families. Through the combined efforts of the Duluth medical community and the city's Trades Council, the Shoreview House of Hope is now nearing completion. It'll provide an 11-unit residential facility for regional cancer patients and their families, and will be located near Duluth's main cancer treatment centers. No one will be refused shelter because of inability to pay. The labor for the project is all donated by volunteers like Duds Vine.
Makes you feel good. Makes you feel really good, you know, helping people that need it and that are feeling pretty bad already. Everybody has a good attitude about it. It's for a good purpose. You know, that's the main thing. It's for a good cause, and it's helping somebody, and it's going to help people that really can't afford it. People that are already feeling pretty depressed anyway.
Governor Al Quie has established his own committee on volunteerism. The governor recently told the members to look for ways to expand successful volunteer programs in Minnesota. He also wants them to find new ways to attack social problems by increasing government and private sector cooperation. Committee member Laura Lee Garrity says that will require a lot of planning and changes.
I think there'll be a different kind of service delivery system in a few years, and that there will be more reliance upon volunteers, but that's going to have to be done in such a way that it meets the needs of the volunteers as well as the needs of the community. That may mean that agencies that traditionally provide services only between the hours of 9 and 5 or 8 and 5 are going to have to remain open evenings and are going to have to remain open on weekends in order to utilize the volunteer services.
A recent Gallup survey found tremendous interest in volunteerism. The poll reports 31% of Americans already volunteer on a regular basis. 10% of the population averages 7 or more hours a week. Gallup defined volunteering as working in some way to help others for no monetary pay. Under this broad definition, the survey concluded most Americans are willing to volunteer for worthwhile causes. Maggie Davern recruits for the St. Paul Voluntary Action Center.
That there are large numbers of people interested in being of service to others, whether it's perhaps more on a neighborhood basis than we've experienced in recent times, or in a less organized or structured way than maybe in the past. Yes, I think the motivation to give is as strong as ever.
Garrity says there are still misconceptions about who volunteers.
The traditional perception is that volunteers are all middle-aged, middle-income homemakers who are not employed outside the home. That is definitely not true today, if it ever was. 44% of men in this country volunteer, many seniors, many youth. I think that volunteering really covers the full cross-section of our citizenry.
All right, our first person here is Karen Dobbins. And we have a certificate of recognition for Karen.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Volunteers need recognition for their activities. These volunteers from several Twin Cities companies were recently recognized for giving management assistance to nonprofit agencies. But recognition for volunteered time and talent often is not enough. Lori Wiederstrom of the Retired Seniors Volunteer Program says volunteering costs money.
For the volunteer, we also try to provide tangible benefits such as mileage and meal reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses, an insurance policy that covers them while they're volunteering, and recognition. Those things are not free. They cost money to provide that. So in a sense, everyone has to help pay for that, whether it's taxpayer dollars or private dollars or agency receiving the benefit dollars.
And there is considerable debate over how far volunteers can be counted upon to replace paid staff in programs whose budgets are being cut.
Okay, use your rasp.
Whether we can do that legally or not, I'm not sure. Secondly, I don't know that If you're talking about replacing full-time positions, you're talking about, at least for a senior volunteer, the equivalent of 5 to 10 people per week. And you're talking about a lot of training. You're talking about a great deal of supervision, orientation to an agency, a great deal of screening. Far more would be required to manage the volunteers than if you had a paid person in there doing the position, doing the job.
It's true that just the voluntary sector is not going to be able to do it all on its own. But I want to say on behalf of volunteers that you know, maybe their hours are unpredictable, but their commitment is you know, is no less a commitment than the commitment made by paid persons. And you often hear from paid people in voluntary organizations that you know, the volunteers can't hack it. Well, that's sort of a typical reaction, and I bridle at that sort of thing. I think a good person who knows how to work with volunteers can get more out of volunteers than they can get out of people that punch in at 8 and punch out for their coffee breaks and punch out for their lunch. And, you know, that sort of mentality.
Underlying the entire issue are some basic questions like, whose responsibility is it to care for the poor? How much should government do? And do the people making the decisions really understand?
One thing I think needs to be recognized about politicians, and that is they tend to come from the middle class. There are very few poor people who are politicians. And while politicians can profess concern and often have genuine concern, often what's happening to people lies outside their personal experience. And so we can make these enormous shifts in priorities as a nation and as a state and simply accept it as a change in the philosophy of the public or in the attitudes of the public, and we roll with the punch. And there's no personal distress involved because we're not affected personally and we don't know people who are affected personally.
There's some people who need welfare, you know, like little old lady down the street who can't get around, and people who's blind and everything else, but there's people twice as able as I am who's not doing diddly and making more money than I am. And I'm out here working.
As far as cutting programs by the Reagan administration, I think some of it's a good idea because there's a lot of waste in the government. And also giving control back to the local governments is a good idea.
I think that we have to be optimistic that he's chosen a good path for the country to follow. That was the mandate in voting for the man.
I see a lot of people come in here out of work, laid off, just, you know, with nowhere to go, moving to other states. And there's no work there either. I don't know what should be done about it, but there's definitely not enough work.
I voted for him, but I noticed I'm working in a car wash, but it's the only work available right now. I'm still laid off from my other job. I'll know this summer whether or not construction picks up.
Everybody has reason to kick them off of welfare, but nobody has a comprehensive plan for doing anything with them after they're off of welfare. They let it go on for years without saying, all right, you people are on welfare. While you're on welfare, you have to A, produce this much work, and B, have this much education instilled. Now that's important, to get them out of that welfare schedule and get them off that roll. But just to simply cut them off of welfare, that's probably as ignominious a proposal as I've ever heard in my life, because they're going to go from welfare out of the streets, and then we're going to have multiply the problem by raising the crime level, and you know what's going to happen, and I know what's going to happen. So it's just ridiculous to even think that way.
I feel like volunteered all my damn life. Don't tell me about no volunteer. Now there's some money coming, and we old that get it for free almost, you know. And now they want you to volunteer. What else they want? they took the best years of your life and everything, and it built up on them, and then they want the last days, they want you to give them away too.
We have to realize that we're all in it together, that it's not just one section of low-income people or one section of moderate-income people that are being hurt. It's across the board hurting. And that somehow people are either going to have to pull together and reevaluate the quality of life, okay, or there's going to have to be a change in the Reagan administration, or there's going to have to be a lot of private agencies and organizations getting together to bide the time, to go through the transition.
Where do we draw the line in education and human social services between those things which are nice to have but not necessary and those things which are absolutely necessary? And the necessary things are food, clothing, shelter, education. I think there's a great danger that education is going to be shortchanged in the near term, because really education is the machine that runs the whole system. It helps human persons actualize their potentialities. I think we're going through a process of shrinking in which we're going to have intense pain and suffering, a lot of human pain and suffering. We're going to have pain and suffering in the budgeting process for education. And out of this, please God, will come some kind of a general recognition of a solid floor, and it'll be a recognition by the private sector and the public sector. Below this, we cannot go.
Tonight, we've shown you some people who are homeless, hungry, and struggling to get through each day. We've heard claims that government does too much for lazy Americans and not enough for those who need and deserve help. And we've heard a variety of reasons about why it's happening and who's to blame. But it doesn't really matter who's to blame, if anyone. What does matter is finding a way to help. At 10:30 tonight, we'll continue this effort with a live program exploring in greater depth the issues that we've covered in the past hour. We'll have a panel of experts and community leaders who can explain where volunteers are needed and how to volunteer. Our phones will be open so viewers can ask questions, express opinions, and volunteer. Hands Out will continue after the news. Stay with us. You may be able to help.
Tonight's special presentation of Hands Out on WTCN TV is brought to you without commercial interruption by the Pillsbury Company.
This is News Center 11 from WTCN, Minneapolis-St. Paul. The Weekend Report of news, sports, and weather for the Twin Cities and the Northwest. Now for News Center 11, Dennis Bounds.
Good evening. The Minnesota Golden Gophers have done it. They have captured their first Big Ten